Ladies and gentlemen, warm welcome, Matthew Griffin.
Introducing our esteemed speaker.
Thank you, Josephine. Thank you, everyone. So I hope you're all well. I hope you're staying safe. And let's test that theory a little bit, shall we? So my name's Matthew Griffin. I'm the CEO and founder of the 311 Institute and the World Futures Forum. I'm a futurist and strategic advisor to the G7, the G20, and we're going to be having a look at the near to mid-term future of cybersecurity and generally security because they are linked. You might have sort of seen this. So Delaine basically is going to be sending you a copy of this. My background when it comes to security is I ran IBM's what we call PSNS business, so public safety and national security business. So I created blue sky forums for national security agencies around the world, what we call the Five Eyes. One of the last sessions that I was having conversations about basically was the future of ICS security. So that's literally where we are trying to predict future crimes and future cybersecurity threats to nuclear power plants that aren't even built yet, that will need to stand the test of time for 40 to 50 years. Bearing in mind that when we actually have a look at the cybersecurity landscape today, it's one of the fastest moving landscapes that I actually see, and that's saying something. So when we actually have a look at sort of our post-COVID future, I want you to consider this. One of the most resilient industries on earth is serious organized crime and general criminality. Now, as leaders, you'll all be worried of fatbag or gaffer, so Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, coming into your market and disrupting you. But when you start having a look at the revenues, and we'll sort of dive into this in a moment, when you start having a look at the revenues, the net cash reserves, the number of employees that serious organized crime groups like the Mafia, the Yakuza, the Yamaguchi, et cetera, have, the triads, frankly, how would you feel if instead of having gaffer coming after you, you had 4 of the world's leading serious organized crime groups who generally have higher revenues, a higher employee count, bigger cash reserves than gaffer? You'd probably be a bit freaked. I'm going to cover a number of trends, I'm going to cover a number of new attacks, and I'm going to cover how you defend throughout this presentation. So my first 5 rules. Always be paranoid. Some of these are going to be sort of common sense, but always be paranoid because generally there is someone out to get you, whether that's on purpose or by accident. Be prepared for when you get attacked, not if. If you have a look, for example, at Lloyd's of London just a little while ago, they said that the number of attacks on their systems basically have gone from a couple of thousand an hour to tens to hundreds of thousands an hour. We are literally ramping up in terms of scale the number of attacks that take place basically on all of your infrastructures, all of your assets, and all of your people. And there are lots of different threat vectors. We'll have a look at that as well. Now, rule number 3, if it's connected, it's vulnerable. Doesn't matter what it is. I'm going to show you how we can connect some rather strange things and create some rather dangerous new attacks. Everything is weaponizable. So if you and I met face to face, I could pick up a cup and frankly, not that I'd like to, but I could throw that cup in your face. I could weaponize a sponge and I could, I could do some nasty things to you with a sponge, frankly. So let alone basically when we start talking about what we could do with increasingly powerful exponential technologies. For example, like artificial intelligence. As well as 3D printing. I can 3D print a gun, I can create a new type of virus and walk it through customs. In fact, the world's most powerful weapon, according to the UN, is a gene drive. It's more powerful and more impactful and more dangerous than nuclear weapons. We might have a chat about that in a moment. Now, I also want you to get your head around this. This is a very, very important concept. Technology magnifies the power of the individual. Now, what I mean by that is, say, for example, you wanted to bring a sovereign country to its knees 50, 100, 1,000 years ago, you would have needed lots of assets, lots of resources, all expensive, by the way, and you'd have needed a big army. Now, arguably, you need one unethical hacker, an internet connection for about, you could probably use one in a cafe, so we'll call that free, and an exploit. So say, for example, some carefully placed ransomware. In fact, when you have a look at the cost of taking down your business, the costs are falling so much that I could cripple your business for less than the amount of money you pay your children in a weekly allowance. So consider that. We'll sort of walk through some of these. Now, when we start having a look at the serious organised crime groups, as well as general criminals, let alone state-sponsored actors, we're talking about some astronomical numbers when we start looking at things like threat vectors. So back in 2012, basically we had IPv4. Typically we were looking at 4 billion IP addresses then. We moved to IPv6. Now IPv6 gives us over 340 trillion IP addresses. Now, that is the equivalent of moving from a threat surface that was the size of a golf ball with IPv4 to a threat surface that is the size of the sun with IPv6. That's dangerous, as you know. Over the next 10 years, thanks to low Earth orbit satellite systems and high altitude platforms, so like from Starlink, OneWeb, China, as well as Amazon, we're throwing thousands of space satellites into space. We're going to be connecting up about the next 3.5 to 4 billion people over the next decade. From a crime perspective, that translates roughly into another 100 million cyber criminals, because you can imagine it, the average daily wage for many people around the world is $1.5. If I can say to you, by the way, here's a laptop, here's an internet connection, here's a couple of other things, and you can earn $1,000 off by scamming some lady in England or the Middle East or America or wherever it happens to be, that's tempting. So when we have a look at the increase in revenues from cyber crime, so we leave all the other sort of types of crime alone for the moment, we're looking at $1 trillion now. That represents a $400 billion increase since 2018. You can just see that compound annual growth rate increasing. That'd be brilliant if you were a legal company. Overall, organized crime is now worth about $5 to $6 trillion, which is about 6 to 7% of global GDP. And again, all these numbers are estimates, but these numbers come from the Japanese National Police Authorities, FBI, etc., because we're dealing with grey numbers. These guys hide in the dark. Now, if you've heard of Hydra, Hydra basically is a deep web marketplace. It seems to be turning over about $45 billion. They do a very good job of laundering money. For example, taking in crypto, taking a fee, and then actually kicking it out as cash. And they do that in an interesting way. So this company makes about $1.5 billion a year. And if it was a legal company on the Fortune 500, it'd be number 67. The Mafia, little interesting fact for you. In 2009, the Mafia was Europe's most capitalized bank, according to the Italian government and the Italian authorities. They had over $100 billion in net cash reserves. In addition to that, their annual revenues seem to be in the order of about $248 billion, which puts them at number 5 in the Fortune 100. To put that into perspective, the Mafia have larger revenues, or as large revenues, as Google. But they don't create a search engine. They do something slightly more nefarious. The cost of the pandemic so far has been $40 trillion to the global economy, depending how you slice and dice it. 2 years ago, though, Canadian researchers took $100,000, they took some mail-order DNA, and they recreated the extinct horsepox virus. For $100,000, they created a horsepox virus which has an R rating of 3 to 4, which is worse than coronavirus. They went to the World Health Organization. It got noted in public journals. You can go and read those online. And as is the case basically when we start talking about future crimes, the regulators and governments basically of that time, only 2 years ago, just went, meh. The cost of gene sequencing and everything else is coming down. This will be $100 in some criminal's garage in a couple of years, if not this year. So you want to take down the global economy as a criminal organization in the future? Give me $100, get an eBay account, and give me some CRISPR. Now, again, a couple of years ago, we had over 40 of the world's top experts from the private and public sector. They did something, or they played something called the Doomsday Games. Now, the Doomsday Games are literally just that. Think of lots of different ways to destroy the planet. And the red team were fantastic at figuring out ways to destroy the planet. In fact, in the words of the leader, they matched some of the world's greatest sci-fi writers. When it came to coming up with solutions, though, the things that you guys are actually interested in, the quote of the day was, how did they do? Not well. They came up with two rather lame defenses. So, asking you this, as CISOs and as leaders, when was the last time you got your teams and other teams together and you got a mix of people together under one roof to play Doomsday Games? You will freak yourselves out, and then you'll really get worried by the fact that you don't have much of an answer for any of the interesting threats that you come up with. Now, let's go through some of the attacks. So, the attackers. That's it. I've picked a joker, as you can see for the background. There's a reason for that. Now, one of the things basically that organized crime groups are doing, as well as just regular criminals, is they're actually sending a lot of their people to school. Literally, we have big schools, we have scamming and phishing schools open in Nigeria. When they start testing exploits, typically Africa is actually quite a hotbed of exploitation for a number of different reasons. But for example, in this particular case, if you are practicing how to hack something, you don't go straight away and hack JP Morgan or FedEx. You go off and you go and practice. Africa and a variety of different emerging countries are actually being used to test future weapons and future exploits. So they go to school. In addition to that, I don't necessarily need very many skills now to actually hack you, whether it's a DDoS attack, whether it's a zero-day exploit, some ransomware, or whatever it happens to be. I can go onto the dark web with Tor. I can find a particular forum. I can download some exploits. I can literally watch videos from companies like Anonymous, who will tell you, do this, do this, do this, point this at this company, take them down. And once I've run my exploit, if I'm actually having problems, I've got a service desk I can call. And apparently the service desks are excellent. They're 5 stars. So I can get help, which is really nice. It's like crime as a service. In fact, it's literally crime as a service. Now, supply chain attacks. We've seen this with the recent SolarWinds attacks. I don't necessarily need to try to attack you head on. I can go and attack your suppliers. So how secure are your suppliers? I can clone you. So when we start having a look at artificial intelligence, basically we have a whole variety of different AIs coming through, particularly in the synthetic media space. So let me take 1 minute of your voice and I can clone it. Now, this has already been tried. So for example, someone recently tried cloning the voice of a CEO, a German CEO. That German CEO phoned up the CEO of a UK energy firm because it was a subsidiary, asked them to transfer $250,000 to a Romanian bank account, and they did. Euler Hermes actually paid out on the cyber insurance for that one as well. You can read about that in the Wall Street Journal. So increasingly, we have the technology to clone a variety of different biometric identities. So I can clone your voice, I can clone your face, I can clone a whole variety of different things. It's like absolute personalized ID fraud. In addition to that, if you wonder why cyber criminals have been taking over Twitter verified accounts, that's because I can do a number of things. Firstly, I take over Elon Musk's Twitter account. I then start tweeting something. By the way, have you bought this latest crypto thing? You can get returns of 1,000% by investing $1,000 of Bitcoin. And people go in and do that. But when we start looking at really how we can weaponize synthetic identities, what would happen if I could get Tom Cruise to tout my crypto? Wouldn't that be great? And I don't know, here's a celebrity. We need some celebrities in our lives.
What's up, TikTok? You guys cool if I play some sports?
I sure am, Tom. play that sport. Great golfer.
I love it. More for the audio experience.
Audio experience is a bit ratty.
As much as the momentum. Hey, listen up, sports and TikTok fans. If you like what you're seeing, just wait till what's coming next.
What is coming next? I hope you don't fall over a table.
That's why.
Oh.
Okay,
That's
TikTok.
embarrassing.
Impression time. This is a 5-second impression
Love
of a
impressions.
snapping turtle coming out of its shell.
Show us, Tom. That's great. Oh.
Did it mess up my hair?
No, hair's good.
Nope.
Thanks, Tom. So later, I'm going to get Tom to promote my crypto scam schemes. He seems like a nice guy. Does great impressions too. Now, when we start having a look at the Internet of Everything, we can compromise anything that is attached to the internet. We said everything is vulnerable. I can also hack GPS. So recently, it's believed that the Russian military tested a GPS spoof. Now, you might not necessarily think you care about GPS spoofs, but what happens basically if I can put all of your cargo ships at an airport? And they did. We had 30 cargo ships turning up on GPS at an airport. Now, what happens when I start messing around with the GPS basically that are used by pretty much everything that we use today? What happens if I start using the GPS on the cars? That's it. Why don't I just send a connected car off a cliff? Yeah, it's a little bit fast and furious. Now, we can protect against that because we have quantum key distribution that is coming to help save autonomous cars from kind of oddball hacks, but nevertheless, they're open to attack, even when you compartmentalize all the different firmwares and software and everything else. And I can do all kinds of things. GM recently had to recall 1.5 million cars because their OnStar system, it's easy for me to say, was actually vulnerable to attack. Someone actually took over one of the cars, accelerated it up and down the freeway, and frankly had control of it. We had another particular car company where hackers got in via the brake sensor, and then they managed to get into the engine control management system. Fun stuff. However, talking of fun stuff, I'm sure you have all got connected fridges, or a connected toaster, or a connected thermostat, or whatever it happens to be. I can send in a botnet attack. I can go and attack your smart fridge. And again, we've done this. And I can get your fridge to mine cryptocurrency. I can also get your company's cloud instance to mine cryptocurrency for me, as actually recently happened basically with Tesla, ironically. So you've got a whole bunch of different computers and computing platforms in all your smart devices. If I can aggregate all that together, thanks. Now, other things that we can do with Internet of Things, basically if I can alter the setting on a sensor, or I can alter the measurement that is being reported by a sensor, then as we've seen with rats attacks, I can blow up your power plant. I can blow up your industrial plant. I can shut down your utilities. So we actually this is kind of another way that we could have taken down the colonial pipelines recently on the east coast of the US. So by adjusting one sensor or one sensor reading basically within your industrial platforms or other things, I can cripple you. Ransomware, we kind of have to talk about ransomware, but increasingly ransomware are these sort of sporadic attacks. I didn't really mean to specifically target you. You just kind of downloaded my stuff. Thank you very much. And then we start encrypting all of your stuff. Now, what you can do is when your things start getting encrypted, you see power consumption spiking. That's a good tip that something's going wrong basically in your infrastructure. But today basically we can actually take a small company offline. Basically we can take a big company offline. Basically we can take a city offline. We've had ransomware attacks with smart cities. If your country is really connected, which actually China is, they're combining all their different databases and joining everything together. I can take your country offline. And did you know that Estonia is one of the very few countries basically that actually has cold reserves and cold stores based over in Lithuania, and they can reboot their country if that kind of thing happens. I can also take down your hospital. I can take down your moon base. I am a futurist. I do feel I need to stick some future things in there. But in addition to that, I can hack your implanted medical device. I can start encrypting the software basically on your IMD, and now I'm ransoming you for your life. By the way, give me 100 bitcoins, otherwise I will kill you. I think you're probably going to pay that one. Or the company. We've got adversarial attacks. But if I change 1 pixel in a medical image, you no longer have cancer, even though you actually do have terminal cancer. Adversarial attacks basically are increasingly useful, particularly when it comes to things like medical fraud. Over in the US, medical fraud is now about $135 billion, but by using adversarial attacks, I can change the outcomes of clinical trials. In addition to that, basically by doing other kinds of adversarial attacks, such as sticking a sticker in a particular place on a stop sign, I can get your semi-autonomous or fully autonomous car to speed straight through an intersection. I hope you don't get hit by a truck, by the way. That's it. There'll be one less person watching this presentation. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. In addition to that, talking about the weaponization of artificial intelligence, we can encode all these different things into AI. We have robo-hackers that will scan 40 million lines of code in about 2 minutes, and they will identify exploits and vulnerabilities. These systems, which are already being used by the US Pentagon, can then ask you 2 questions. Would you like me to cripple this company using this exploit, or would you like me to patch it? And companies like IBM and BlackBerry actually have robo-hackers basically will do the same thing. They'll identify an exploit, then they'll patch it. But as we start seeing the weaponization of artificial intelligence, whether it's via polymorphic self-evolving malware, again, easy for me to say, this is going to give you a headache. It's going to give your insurers a headache, because you are no longer up against purely human hackers. You are up against self-evolving, self-replicating, self-designing artificial intelligences. There's another type of AI that you should check out. It's called open-ended AI. It comes out of Uber Labs, ironically. It will actually try to identify a problem, and then just like humans, it will try to figure out the best way to overcome that problem. So imagine it comes across your firewall and it goes, here's a problem to solve. How do I solve a firewall? But it's now plugged into the internet. So open-ended artificial intelligence is on no one's radars yet, but here we are. And actually, just speaking of a weird one, when we start talking about deepfakes, as we did a little bit earlier, I can also deepfake your GIS system. So I can do all kinds of crazy things with that. That's a new deepfake one that has only really just emerged. In addition to that, now we're starting to look a little bit further into the future by looking into the past. We recently had hackers basically who were able to encode malware into physical strands of DNA. They then sent those to a police forensics lab. The gene sequencing system at the forensics lab then compiled that into binary. So it took the DNA sequences, put it into 1s and 0s, actually compiled an executable, and then hackers took over the police forensics lab. So this is where we turn DNA into malware. And then, of course, we have quantum computers. When we get to about 1,000 qubits on a quantum computer, we should be able to crack 4,096-bit encryption in about 8 hours. And if you think post-quantum crypto is safe, it isn't. The Chinese have already managed to hack the seed of a laser and actually crack post-quantum crypto. There are loads of peer review papers on that one. So this is just part of my kit bag as a criminal. So now let's have a look at the defenders. Notice the same picture as the attackers. If you have a defensive mindset, you're already going to lose. You need to think like a criminal. And the criminals are some of the most innovative people on the planet, and they are resilient. So you've got to change your mindset. That's the first thing you've got to do when you're a defender. Now, number one, once you've done that, is education. Educate all your people. Top to bottom, side to side. So educate them on usual things, cybersecurity, phishing, spear phishing, all that kind of stuff. Educate your people. Absolutely number one. The second thing that you should do, and this will be the best money you have ever spent, go and write up a contract basically with a penetration testing company. There's a bunch of them out there. There's companies like NCC Group. They have some very exciting stories and quite concerning stories about how they can actually hack you physically, as well as from a cyber perspective. You've got companies like HackerOne, etc., etc. Go and get a penetration testing company to hack you. Not just physically hacking you, but cyber hacks as well. You've got to look at both. I've had companies basically where the CFO's laptop was stolen because someone used an aerosol canister to get into the exit of a building, and then they managed to just use behavioral engineering as they were walking around with a name tag going, "Hey, do you know where the CFO's office is?" And they just went in and got his laptop. You are hackable in so many different ways. Eliminate passwords. This is the number one thing that the vast majority of security experts say. Go biometric. Eliminate physical passwords. They're rubbish. They do not protect you. Speaking of passwords, go and find porn. Not the other kind. PAWN. You know what this stuff is. So for example, Google have recently teamed up with an open source project because these systems increasingly will search the dark web to find compromised passwords. You know, if you go into Chrome, you'll sometimes see a little pop-up saying, you know, the password for this account has appeared on a dark web database, you know, change it. Go and do one of these exercises. See how many of your passwords and things are already compromised. Zero trust. Do not trust anybody. 5G, for example, is going to be helping you bring operational technology and IT, so front-end and back-end technologies together. Do not trust anyone within your organization or outside your organization. Zero trust. Team up. So over in the US, basically we have the IACDS system. Now what I mean by team up is this. If you are a big, say, European bank, say like Santander, HSBC, Barclays, whatever it happens to be, and I go into your cybersecurity teams, I guarantee you're probably spending a good couple of $100 million hiring the best cybersecurity experts, investing in the best platforms and everything else. As a cyber criminal, you're a bit of a high bar for me. However, 95% of organizations, both in the US and in the Middle East, as well as Europe, are SMEs and SMBs. So I tell you what, I'm going to leave Barclays alone for now. I'll focus on them in a little bit. I'm going to go after SMBs. And SMBs, their cybersecurity teams are literally a one-man band, a dog, and a part-time donut. So what we talk about by teaming up is it's almost the concept of the Great Firewall of China. So the US, Japan, UK, Germany are talking about building firewalls basically where these systems protect people. So as a one-man band or a 10-man band or a 50-woman band, I plug into your system. So this is kind of cloud security. It's a slightly different take. In the US, the IACDS system, which is sponsored by the Department of Homeland Security, has 400 of the US's Tier 1 and Tier 2 banks plugged into it, and they have the NSA. So when the NSA starts seeing that one bank is being attacked or something weird's going on, they update the entire system. Plus the IACD system is designed to go fully autonomous. So we plug back into that robo-hacker concept that we talked about earlier. Team up. And talking about teaming up, go and have conversations with CISOs in your competitors' businesses and other businesses. Talk about the dark arts. Because just as I see with a lot of ICS conferences, when you come together, they say, we talk about the dark art of the dark art. You know, and we shouldn't really talk about how to hack a nuclear power station. Do you really think the criminals are all sitting there going, let's not talk about how to hack a nuclear power station? Of course they're not. So talk to your peers. Teamwork is important. You cannot do it alone. Number 7, go to war. What I mean by this is go and run virtual simulations, go to an IBM battle bus. There's loads. Mimecast basically bought a sort of cyber range company recently as well. Go to war. Go and get your analysts and your teams and put them to war. And then see how well prepared they are once they're hacked. Yeah, have a plan, run the plan, run the plan, run the plan, run the plan. Get the idea? Keep doing that. Be privileged. So when we have a look at privileged account management systems, one of the biggest tricks in the book is I get access to a root account, basically, and then I have horizontal access to your entire organization. So privileged account management systems, at least go and have a look at those, and actually I urge you to go and cordon those privileged accounts off. Go confidential. So this is for the software developers out there. When we have a look at things like the ARM v9 architecture, we have the concept of confidential computing that disconnects the privileged software. The operating system is typically regarded as something called privileged software, and it can access lots and lots of different things. go confidential. So have a look at how your developers can embrace confidential computing. In addition to that, when we start having a look at number 10, encrypt everything. You do not want to be an organization on the front of the Wall Street Journal, basically, or France 24 as the organization who did not encrypt any user information but got hacked. Encrypt everything. Go cold. Bearing in mind that encryption is also weaponized now, make sure that if the worst happens, you have backups in what we sort of call cold storage. Very nearline, but realistically offline. So this is where, for example, Estonia, they have cold storage. They can reboot their entire country in the event of a crippling cyber attack. You should be able to do the same. If you were attacked today via ransomware and your entire organization basically was taken offline, what would you do? Number one, you'd panic, but you shouldn't. Get prepared, run the plan, look at your cold backups. Go robo. So AI is being weaponized by cybersecurity criminals, cyber criminals. It's actually a good tool for you as well. So we've got companies like Darktrace with autoimmune systems and all sorts, but you know, we're still starting down here and we're slowly automating different bits of the stack. So I encourage you to go and have a look at robo-hackers. So for example, with some of the platforms out there, they can actually identify a threat. They already have a set of policies for dealing with that threat and they can kill it. So the usual way that some of these systems work is they identify a threat, they tell Bob over in your SOC. Bob's actually at lunch, so he comes back a little bit later and finds that someone's actually encrypted your entire organization. Robo-hackers, they came out of things like capture the flag competitions, basically with DARPA a couple of years ago. They're being used by the Pentagon now to protect mission critical systems and things. At least go and explore them. Get a point of view on this stuff. Be confusing. You know, it's one of the oldest tricks in the book, but it actually works. You know, we call these honeypots, but you know, just be confusing. If I'm trying to hack your system, yeah, try and get me to hack the wrong part of your system, for example. And speaking of hacks, basically, we actually have hardware cybersecurity defenses coming through. We've got the Morpheus computer chip, courtesy of University of Michigan. It'll be available probably in about 7 years, but just mentioning this one just for a little bit of futurist fun. The Morpheus computer chip is a computer chip that reconfigures itself every 50 or so milliseconds. It's the equivalent of a Rubik's Cube of a computer. So if I can get access to it, 50 seconds later, it's changed. And recently, 300 of the world's top hackers tried to break it, and they had direct access, they had everything they needed, they couldn't touch it. Modernize your code. Now, particularly if you're a large organization, I know organizations that have got $1 billion plus worth of legacy stuff. Now, artificial intelligent universal translators that let me talk English but then translate into French or Spanish or Chinese, we actually have those coming through for code. So IBM has some of those. We've also got Facebook that has some of those. So that's where I can take things like COBOL or Fortran, and then artificial intelligence can literally translate that into Java, Python, Ruby. They're still quite basic, don't get me wrong, but just consider some of these new code modernization technologies that are coming through. One of the last ones, predict the future. Can you predict that you're going to be attacked? In some cases you can. Courtesy of companies like British Aerospace, we control the dark web. We can see people downloading this type of exploit. Maybe it's a SQL injection. They're talking about your company in a forum. And so there's probably quite a good chance that your company is going to be attacked by these people using a SQL injection exploit. Therefore, I can now tell you that you might want to secure your databases and update stuff. So to a degree, we can actually predict cyber attacks. And that's actually an increasingly interesting part of predictive analytics. Again, a whole story in itself. And this is really the last slide. We've got a little video after this. You've got to be prepared, but you've got to be even more prepared for what's coming down the line. Now, from a defender's perspective, quantum computers will enable you to create one-time programs. So those are programs that run once and then just disappear, literally. We've got open-ended AI from companies like Uber. I mentioned that. These are kind of curious artificial intelligences that create their own problems and solve their own problems. They're actually quite scary. We've got quantum technologies. So we've got unhackable communication systems, they're being developed out of Austria, China, the UK, the US. We've got unhackable code. So we've got the Hackmps code out of the US military, which uses a mathematical formula to go and have a look at everything. So for example, it would just verify the code base is correct. When we have a look at supply chain attacks, as the recent SolarWinds attack highlighted, put your firmware updates on the blockchain. So sovereign blockchain-based firmware updates will let you know whether or not your systems are being compromised in real time. So check that one out. And then unhackable chips, I mentioned Morpheus. But frankly, when we start having a look at cybersecurity, whether it's from a consumer or a business perspective, if I sent you an email going, you tried to do something and it generated error code 13,972, sorry, you've no idea what that means. So this organization was actually bought by Verizon. But when we start looking at the combination of different emerging technologies, consider reinventing your cyber defense experience. So guys, can you run VT, please?
Endless points of light. The overwhelming chaos of cyberspace. With its disparate fabric of devices, endpoints, users, and data, you might as well be defending in the dark. So we built an entirely new model that brings order from the chaos. To switch on the lights and reveal your living network with a disruptive and visionary approach, transforming your network into a virtual cityscape. An organization's technology assets brought to life by real-time packet capture and endpoint integration streamed to the cloud. Here, in the immersive grid, security analysts gain a new perspective to patrol, hunt, and respond far beyond log files and dashboards, interacting within the network itself. By leveraging a petabit-scale cloud platform, machine learning technologies, and a high-performance gaming engine, we've created a massively multi-user environment for a new generation of hunters and responders. Science fiction dreams turned present-day reality. The immersive grid.
All right, thank you so much, Matt, for that forward-looking, trend-spotting tech talk. Now it's time to welcome Matt here to the studio for the rapid-fire Q&A. So I say welcome to Matt.
Hey, hi everyone, again.
Hi again, and thank you again for the forward-looking tech talk with the new weapons and also the tools and how we can defend ourselves. And I know that many in the audience also have big use of these trends and also how we're going to utilize them going forward.
Yeah.
I hope you're ready, Matt, because now it is time for the rapid-fire Q&A. So I hope you're ready for the timer shortly. But how it's going to work, everyone in the audience, you have already pre-submitted 10 questions to Matt that we will go through. He will have 60 seconds per question. So fast answers to really important questions, and that will spark the continuation of the discussion in the Thinkers Hub for selected invited guests here in the audience afterwards. But Matt, are you ready?
Let's go.
All right, are we ready with the timer?
They are, yes.
There we are. All right. So the first question, we hear a lot about, cyber attacks and security from time to time. But are there different types of cyber criminals, and how do they behave?
Absolutely. So there are three types of cyber criminals. There are state-sponsored actors who realistically are going to leave the vast majority of organizations alone unless you are interesting, like a defense company, an aerospace company, or a government. The second type of criminals that we actually see are serious organized crime groups. So they actually have some levels of either regional, international, or global cooperation, basically where they coordinate with one another to do whatever it is they're up to. As I said, there's lots of different ways I can take your company offline. The third one, though, basically kind of the hobbyist hackers. And when we have a look at the hobbyist hackers, those are kind of the guys basically that are literally just spreading whatever it is that they're up to. Say, for example, ransomware in all kinds of different directions, basically, and you just happen to get hit by them because you were one of the people who downloaded a link from the billion emails that they sent. So, and then in terms of in terms of how you actually protect against those, consider this. When we have a look at the number of cyber attacks, 15% of cyber attacks are focused on public sector, and the rest, so 85%, are focused on private sector. The SMB, out of that 85%, represents 65% of all cyber attacks. So how you respond, the actors basically that you prioritize, the things that you do really are driven by the type of organization you are, the value of your assets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
All right. Good answers. Now to the second question. We're going to talk about threat intel because, of course, threat intel and how we obtain information and how it works, of course, enable us to tailor our cybersecurity defenses as well. But do you have any good tips on how to stay up to date and where to obtain this threat intel from?
So criminals basically are absolutely ingenious. So I'll give you a couple of quickie examples. Napster actually gave rise to iTunes. Deepfakes came from the porn industry. So actually came from people who were trying to weaponize the porn industry, sort of being a little bit more specific. So criminals are incredibly inventive. When you have a look at ransomware, criminals just took something that was designed to protect us and weaponized it and turned it against us. So when we start having a look at where you can go basically for where you can go to have conversations about cyber, future attacks and all that kind of stuff, get out your comfort zone, ask uncomfortable questions, go and have a conversation with the peers, say, for example, your equivalent CISOs at other organizations, go across industries. If you're a bank, go and have a conversation with a grocery company. Don't just stay within the banking sector because there's other stuff happening over here. In addition to that, go and have a conversation basically with your suppliers and your partners. So, for example, if you're buying from Microsoft, have a chat with them. Go to events. Go and have a conversation basically with analysts, researchers, experts. Have a conversation with black hats, so kind of reformed hackers, but also white hackers. In addition to that, go and have a conversation with penetration testing companies. This is what they do. You need to have a culture of going and having tough conversations that are uncomfortable with lots of different people. Because if you're not talking to other people and going, I work for a bank, how do you think someone could take me out? Or how do you think someone will take me out? You're going to get hit. Other things you can do is have a look at emerging technology. So obviously I look at the next sort of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. There's loads of different ways you can weaponize stuff. So for example, when I was having conversations with people building nuclear power stations, we looked at cyber, but actually we figured that we could take a soft robot, crawl a soft robot up the waste intake pipe of a nuclear power station and overheat the nuclear power station from the inside using a soft robot. I don't need to go and cripple you basically using a cyber exploit. There's loads of weird stuff, but you've got to get out there and look at some of the bleeding edge stuff. But you've got to think, how would I weaponize this? Become an attacker, and then obviously defend.
Obviously. Really good. All right, to the next one. We're going to talk about critical assets. So whether it's the data that we hold, intellectual property, operational technology, every business have assets that they consider to be crown jewels.
Yeah.
But what is your opinion, and what do you say is the most important critical asset that the company should look out for at the moment?
So again, it does depend on your industry, but there's everything. So people, assets, and data. When we have a look at data, keep one copy of your data. So for example, what I mean by that is don't have 5 different customer databases, because 4 of those could be really secure and they'll go after the 5th. Keep all of your, deduplicate your information and keep all of your know what your vital information is, its value to the company, know where it is, because most organizations don't know where their information actually is, and that's great for an attacker. And then deduplicate it, keep one copy and protect that as a crown jewels. When you have a look at people, educate people. So typically 80% of cyber attacks come in via your front end, so your laptops and your people. It's the common garden, spear phishing, or phishing link that I click that, and now suddenly I've got malware running around my network. And then when you have a look at assets, you've got to do an inventory of your assets. You have to think from a criminal's perspective. If I was outside your organization and I was actually looking at your business, what would I go after? So for example, I see if you're a car rental company and you have fully autonomous vehicles, I could just go after them and try and take control of those. So every organization is different. But what assets would an attacker go after that are high value to the attacker and high value to you? So create that risk register and that asset list and then go through it. But you've got to be systematic and you've got to know what you're looking for. What can I attack that is critical to you, that'll cause you maximum pain, that I can then use to leverage something from you or from someone else? Because I might actually be looking to steal some of your data, but I'm going to sell your F-35 plans to the Chinese. High value assets.
Yeah, we have such interesting responses to these as well. So we will cover as many questions as possible, but cliffhanger would be that for those that we don't cover, we will continue in the Thinkers Hub in the Q&A as well. But hey, speaking of people, a good cybersecurity strategy is as much as about people and culture as also the technology that we have. It's embedded in everything that we do, one can say. But what is your tip to the audience on how to engage people in a cybersecurity strategy, but also to make them be aware about it, but also best practices?
Yeah. So again, it's education, but on the one hand, you've got to lead by example as an executive team. You've got to be seen to do everything safe, ethically, moral, and everything else. When we have a look at, for example, most cyber training, let's say, for example, we take phishing training. I'm going to send you a link, you click it, I answer a bunch of questions, and hey, I get 95%, and fantastic, I'm a cybersecurity phishing expert. So there are a couple of things, there are a couple of interesting things you can do. So, okay, by all means, do video on demand training, but actually get people in face to face when you're allowed to actually tell them why this stuff is important. In addition to that, some of the silly things that you can actually do is, I can tell all of your employees that what we're going to do is we're going to do some video on demand training from Matt's cybersecurity training company. Keep an eye out for the link. And one of my customers actually ended up sending people phishing links. So they'd send them links going, hi, we're your cybersecurity training company. Please click this link here to start your training. And it went straight to a fake login page. And they went to the CEO and the CISO of these particular sort of Fortune organizations and went, by the way, here are all your login credentials. Thank you very much. And we actually downloaded your database and stuff. So you've got to drill it into people that their security is your security and it's everybody's job. You are only as strong as your weakest link. Education and culture.
Really good. That also ties back to what you mentioned earlier, kind of going back to school kind of ideas. So I think that's also a good tip for the audience. Talking about, state-sponsored and also actors, but also people around the globe now having the ability to control your vehicles, getting access to your wearable devices or even your smart home. Will you see like an increase of the surveillance, and how will that kind of been shown in the future?
So that's a very interesting question. So when you have a look at the future of privacy, you are all used to having no privacy when you are online. When it comes to offline, you actually expect some kind of privacy, but increasingly I can spy on you via all of your different devices. So let's quickly start at, say, the 30,000 foot, literally. So in fact, we'll go higher than that. So firstly, we have satellites in low Earth orbit from companies like Orbital Systems, basically, that are able to track your movements from space. It's called TiVo for Earth. You can buy it as a commercial service. Coming down, basically, from the stratosphere, we have something called persistent surveillance drones. So persistent surveillance drones are exactly the same thing. We have these from companies like Elbit Systems, and they're able to use very advanced optics and artificial intelligence to surveil everyone's movements within a city. So typically 50 square kilometers, basically all at once. This is coming from the military first. Coming down to street level, basically if we've got high definition cameras and everything else, I can actually track you. And even if you are fully covered, I can tell it's you because of the way that you're walking. We also have artificial intelligences that can demask you. So if I can only see your eyes, I can still tell it's you. We also have different technologies coming through from the US military, for example, that shine a laser at you, and it can actually measure your heart, the way that your heart beats. So we have kind of a very granular level of biometric security that we can apply, for example, at airports and stuff. Coming down again, so when we actually have a look sort of more in a B2B, B2C setting, if you have a smart speaker like a Google Home, like an Alexa, those Alexas can listen to your voice and tell that you're getting ill, and then they can start recommending, by the way, do you want me to phone up your doctor for you? Just using this web camera here, you can tell whether or not I'm lying because you're using a camera, artificial intelligence and machine vision. You can tell my heart rate, you can tell my blood pressure, you can tell my character, my intent to criminality, thanks to the Chinese, my personality traits, thanks to the Israelis, and all kinds of different things. And that's before I start surveilling you through your television. I can surveil your emotions and your health via Wi-Fi, because I can use an artificial intelligence exploit to turn your Wi-Fi into the equivalent of a millimeter wave sonar device. So it's a little bit like radar. It can literally detect your facial movements, how you're standing, your posture, and everything else at home. So that's before we talk about anything else. That's it. So offline privacy is increasingly a fallacy in the future, as it is now. And that's and then we deal with that with regulators, by the way, who are nowhere near up to speed with what I just told you all. Because I deal with
They need to catch up. They need to catch up.
Yeah, that's the whole story.
Hey, this is a very interesting discussion, and I know that the audience wants to join in. And it's actually now time, everybody, to actually join into the discussion. So we have exclusive access to a Thinkers Hub, where we'll take this Q&A to the next level. We will continue with some of these questions, but also where you can ask questions directly to Matt and also spar and share your experiences as well. So you will go back to the agenda tab, and then you will click the access link in 5 minutes. Before that, you can take a glass of water or anything like that, and I will see you back there.
See you in a minute.